What's up, nerds? Lauren here from nerdcaliber.com, and I'm at Anime USA 2016. Here we have a question of the convention. What is the scariest thing that has happened to you while in cosplay?
The scariest thing that's ever happened to me in cosplay is your cosplay rips, and then, you know, your underwear and your things are hanging out. Like, that's like, ooh, it's a little scary.
So the scariest thing that's ever happened to me when I was in cosplay was when I was on roller skates and I fell down the escalators on my butt.
The scariest thing that's happened to me in cosplay is in the Great Katsucon Fire of 2016. I thought I was going to die because I was Rey from Star Wars stuck outside in the galing winds for 20 minutes.
So the scariest thing that ever happened to me while I was in cosplay was actually this morning when I was walking to the con. I tripped over my own feet because, you know, feet don't want to be feet sometimes. And I just went flying down towards the pavement and everything went up in the air. And the next thing I know, all of my stuff was broken.
The scariest thing that happened to me in cosplay was probably one of my first cons. I backed up at a meetup and I stepped on someone's prop and it just snapped and I freaked out and they were like, no, it's okay. And I was like, no, it's definitely not okay. And I was horrified and I'm still traumatized to this day.
At Katsucon 2015, I went outside because cosplay gets kind of hot and I just stood right outside the door of the lower level at the Gaylord, and these people came running in, so I held the door open for them to come in because they had a bunch of heavy stuff. And then I stepped back inside because it got really windy, and I heard them say, what was that thing that was following us? And I'm just like, oh man. And sure enough, I turned around and there was this shadow that just kind of darted across the door, and I'm just like, oh no. And this, Gaylord is right next to the water, so I had no idea what it was.
I ran into Han Solo. He said he'd get me first, and he did. So I destroyed him.
I would say that the scariest thing that ever happened to me was when I was dressed as a child and I was talking with some friends and we were just chatting away, and they just kind of stopped talking and looked behind me, and I looked behind me and there was a giant pedo bear just standing there.
I was walking through the dealer's room and there was a Slender Man following me, and when I finally noticed him.
The scariest thing to happen to me while in my cosplay costume was today when my pantyhose ran. Now I'm not wearing them.
The scariest thing that happened to me in cosplay was this morning when I walked outside and it was windy and the wind pulled me by the head from the ears.
I was cosplaying Dipper from Gravity Falls. I locked eyes with another Dipper and he bum rushed me. I thought he was going to hug me, but he went for the hardest high five I've ever had, and I was just like, whew.
I was walking around in normal clothes, getting a feel for everything. It's like, this is really cool. Walking around the artist alley with my friend, and we're just we're looking around, and then all of a sudden we just turn around, and standing right behind us is a 10-foot no face from Spirited Away. I was just like, oh Jesus on a cracker, oh my god.
I was going up the elevator and I had a massive skirt on. It was 2 hoops and several crinolines. It was really big and poofy. And I went up the escalator and my sister, who was holding the dress behind me, dropped it just as I was getting off the escalator, and it got stuck. And the escalator started eating my dress. So by the time I got it yanked out and was actually able to, go and repair it, I had lost about 4 inches off the back of my dress. And it was so terrifying because I honestly thought that the way the dress was attached to me, that it was just gonna yank me down and start pulling me back. And it's like one of those horrible childhood fears where you're just like, oh no, the escalator's gonna eat me.
The scariest thing to happen to me while in cosplay was definitely when my shoe here snapped and came up today, and it tore, and I thought that I'd have to go like that all day. I had to tear the fabric and add super glue and hope that it would stay all day, otherwise my entire cosplay would have been ruined.
I was in Baltimore dressed as Cinderella, and I was going down a street. It was a shortcut and I shouldn't have taken it, and I was getting some creepy comments and creepy gestures and glances towards me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to walk faster, but I'm in these freaking glass slippers and I can't. And I was Cinderella, so I looked nice. I didn't want any of that negative attention.
One time some girl grabbed my chest and it was very awkward.
Scariest thing that's happened to me ever at a con was I had a group of women actually grope me. I was what was I? I was actually my Star Fox cosplay the other time, and they just came up and started groping me for like 30 seconds and just left.
There was one year at Katsucon where there was a person who came up and asked me, what was I? And I kind of understood what he was implying. And because I didn't appreciate the tone of his voice, I just kind of gave him the hard glare. His immediate response to that was to try to reach under my skirt to check, which led to a very quick hand grab and a mention that he better walk away before security was called.
A guy asked me to do a selfie with him, and I was by myself at that time, and so he told me to look one way, and he was like, oh, what's over there? And then I was like, I don't see it, and then I turned around, and he like attempted to like get really close to my face and kiss me, but I was like, no.
So the scariest thing to happen to me in cosplay was over at Anime Expo 2 years ago in 2014. I was doing Kuronosuke from Kurage Hime, and with Anime Expo you have a lot of American guests as well as Japanese guests, because Japanese guests love to fly over, since Cali is sort of a close locale for them, and see how involved America is with cosplay and anime in general. And so I'm standing in West Hall, just standing there under the light, everything looks great, and a Japanese guest approached me and he's just like, photo. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no problem, sure. And so I pose as usual, as every cosplayer does, and then all of a sudden he's like, kiss. And I'm like, kiss? Like, what? He's like, kiss. And all I do is just kind of like air kiss and walk away awkwardly from the entire situation.
The scariest thing that's ever happened to me while in cosplay wasn't really terrifying, but it was more uncomfortable, extremely uncomfortable actually. A complete stranger who was helping to run the convention asked to take our picture, and he put his hands on our butts, and it was unfortunate and uncomfortable, and I wanted to die.
Scariest thing that's happened to me in cosplay, I was dressed up as Usopp the God from One Piece, and a gentleman almost dressed as Sanji sat next to me, started a conversation, and then felt the need to feel under my clothing. Yes, he did. He's like, oh, you're the muscly kind when he goes through the time warp. And I was like, yes. And he's like, okay. And he starts feeling me up. And I'm like, hey, bro, not cool. So I just kind of got up and walked away.
We actually had a con stalker. We went to Anime Boston, and then we kind of ran into him at AAC in New Hampshire. And it was kind of scary because he was creeping on us, not just at the rave, but the entire convention.
He was very touchy.
Extremely.
So the scariest thing that ever happened to me during a cosplay was a very large man came up and asked if he could rest his head across my chestal area. And I just said, sure, real quick, and got a photo and scampered off.
Thanks for watching, y'all. And make sure to like and subscribe Nerd Caliber on YouTube, and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and everything else. And make sure to leave us a comment on what's the scariest thing to ever happen to you while in cosplay.